Hello, hello. It's Mondays with Tara and Andre. We are going to start in just a second. Hey,
Yes.
Andre.
Hi, Tara. Hello, everyone.
Woohoo. All right, all right. Let's get going. Hey, Andre.
Hi, Tara. Hello, everyone. How are you?
Great, great. It's Monday, my favorite day of the week.
Is that really? I wonder if you're in the minority there.
Probably,
Mm,
probably.
mm. I think Fridays come in or Saturdays come in. Maybe Sundays come in pretty high up there.
Yeah, I mean, I do love the weekend, but I don't know. There's something about Monday that's like fresh and it's like a new week full of
Mm.
new exciting things. I don't know. Yeah, I love Mondays. And also, I love Mondays because I get to spend time here with you talking about something having to do with open relationships and polyamory and, just getting support out there into our awesome Let's Talk Polyamory community. And I don't know, it's one of my favorite days, and that's a big part of it, I think. So yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, cool.
yeah. So hi to everyone who's joining us. If you please say hello in the comments, let us know that you can hear us and everything is good. Oh, I see some comments. Let me make sure. Somebody. Oh, I wish I knew who this was. Look at this comment.
Yeah, they're teasing us.
Oh, teasing us.
Is that
Yeah.
your mother?
Is it? It's not my mother.
No.
Oh boy. Okay. So today, we're talking about boundaries, personal boundaries.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a big one. In and out of open relating, we need to be able to establish and let it be known what our boundaries are. So yeah, we're going to look at that, and I think it's important. And even if we think we already know all about boundaries, maybe we might hear some stuff that we didn't hear. So let's see what we have to say about it.
Oh, it's Drang. Oh, I have to click that link again. Can you send it? Oh, okay. It's here. Oh, I don't know. It's facebook.com/StreamYard. No, StreamYard.com/Facebook. It's one of the two. I'm sorry, Drang. I can't remember. Long time no see. Okay. So, for those of you who are new, I'm Tara Lynn Franco. I'm a relationship and awesomeness coach.
And I'm Andre Turcotte. I'm a sex positive psychotherapist.
Yeah. And like we said, every week we do a talk like this on a topic related to navigating non-monogamy. So today is we're going to give you 5 tips for communicating your personal boundaries. And I mean, we've talked about this before, but I think we can't talk about it enough, I think, because it does come up. And I think sometimes, yeah, just like having to tell people what our boundaries are, maybe repeat them sometimes. Sometimes it's a good refresher to actually think about our own. So that's what we're doing today. So it's
Yeah.
great.
That's an interesting point to think about our own, because who knows, they may have shifted over time, right? We are plastic, we're forever changing. So boundaries that we might have felt that were important or not as important in the past may need some revisiting on occasion, and they will
Yeah.
inform us painfully, or we can look at them before it happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a bit important topic, and there's also some misconceptions about which we'll go into the definitions in a second. Boundaries, rules, and agreements. Sometimes people use these things interchangeably, so we're going to talk a bit about that. This is just a little bit of a snippet of our full training on boundaries, which is part of our Poly Newbies course. So if you haven't heard us tell you about it, we're just going to share it one more time because we've already started. But there's still time to jump in and get it at the very special price, founding members price. And the benefit of that is not only it's a good price, but you get to join us and follow along live if you can attend the live trainings. But even if you can't, all the trainings, all the exercises are in the course membership site. which you can even access from your phone. So yeah, we are making it easy for you to look at topics like boundaries, agreements. We talk about communication, jealousy, all those things. So the link is up there, and we'll make sure we drop it in the chat as well. So there's basically 5 days left to get it at that for 97 US, which I think is a really great price for all we've packed in. So yeah, and it's for people who, if you're curious, if you're watching us and you're curious about opening your relationship, or wondering if it's for you, if you've already started in and you're kind of like facing a few little sticky issues and are looking for tools to support working through those, or you just want to feel more prepared for what's to come. And I think, being prepared is always great. I mean, I feel like we kind of, when we jumped in, didn't necessarily have all these things in place, and we faced bumps along the way, and we learned from those, but we'd like to make your journey a little less bumpy. So that's the point. So yeah. So boundaries. Boundaries. Yeah. Oh, I'm curious for those of you watching in us today, either live or in the replay, is on a scale of 0 to 5, how hard or uncomfortable is it to let people know your boundaries? So 0 being, super easy, to 5, it's a non-issue, to 5 being it's very hard. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting again to compare it to different people in different situations and different boundaries, right? So some things might be easy to announce, and other things might be more difficult. And it's curious to see what's at play when it is easier, when it's more difficult.
Yeah, and today we're talking about what personal boundaries are, and why they're important, and like you said, how to set them and communicate them. And part of this is what you believe about your boundaries. Sometimes that's why it's hard, is that we believe that these things are going to be rejected, or people are not going to accept us, or whatever it is. So we'll talk a bit about that. So.
And I'm sure everyone has at some point in their life come across a time when their boundaries were not recognized or honored, and how did that make us feel, right? So maybe you can leave a comment for us and let us know what that was like for you.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the difference between these things. So I often hear people in the group say, "Oh, someone crossed our boundaries," or "These are our boundaries." It just recently came up. I had a talk with someone last week, and they said, "Oh yeah, that we have certain boundaries." I was like, "Oh, are those your boundaries or your collective boundaries?" So I like to distinguish the things that boundaries are personal. They're the things that focus on you. So that's why I tend to refer to them as personal boundaries. So what you need, what you're comfortable with, and how you want to be treated.
So are you saying then that boundaries would be individualized, whereas if we do it collectively, it's less of the case? Because I wonder, to that point, very often people say that they might start off solo in whatever way they like to relate, and that at some point, if they couple with somebody in whatever capacity, that they become this entity, that it becomes a we, and they get included, they get wrapped together. And isn't it possible that we might share these boundaries as a we?
I think you might have similar boundaries, but I think I like to distinguish boundaries from things like agreements that we might have with our partners. Because the agreements are based, we like to say an agreement is something we agree to. It's an arrangement, or I don't like the word contract, but like it's something you agree on what is to be done, and things that you and your partner will accept or allow. And like we always, one of the models we teach in our program is about our values-based agreement. So, the things you say and do to uphold these values in your relationship. So you may have common boundaries, personal boundaries, to answer your question, I think. But you would have an agreement on what arrangement you're going to have around your open relationship or polyamory if you're partnered.
So these boundaries are the things that we've erected for ourselves, these things that we hold to be important, and then we can share them with our partner or partners, and we can have shared boundaries that might be in the form of an agreement. We both consent to this. We both have an idea of an arrangement in between.
Yeah, and that's the important part of agreement, and we go into that a lot in our training about agreements, but that everybody agrees to it. So it's not you have an agreement, we have an agreement, you and I have an agreement, and by virtue of, someone else who comes into a relationship with us together or individually, if I'm dating someone, that they must adhere to the agreement. They sort of have to be aware and consent to that
Mhm.
agreement. You know what I
So
mean?
an agreement becomes collaborative. It's with another person or persons, whereas our
Mhm.
boundaries, we decide what we're wanting and not wanting.
Yes, that's
Mhm.
that's such a great. You're so good on it. That's
You,
exactly it.
you help me with that, Tara. You
Because
sum it up.
boundaries, when you think of boundaries, it's like the imaginary lines, buffers around ourselves that, sort of protect our bodies, our minds, our emotions, our safety, and our time for ourselves from the behavior or demands of others. So that's why it's more personal. So, yeah, I think we said a lot of that. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's basically five things we wanted to cover today. So we'll I think we're going to try to make this a little more like just give examples of how boundaries come up and how to create boundaries. And there's like five main tips we have. So I think the first part is really knowing what your boundaries are and being
Mhm.
setting them and being clear about them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a basic tenet that we often say that, right? We want to look introspectively and find out what appeals to us and what turns us off. We want to know what our preferences are, and that will help establish what our boundaries are, what our comfort levels are. And then once we've decided for ourselves what we're wanting, then we can set out to make those boundaries clear to others so that there is less room for miscommunication or misinterpretations. We state it clearly.
Yeah. I think for me, like this is a good way of kind of figuring it out for yourself is like thinking about situations in your life that where you've been uncomfortable or you felt hurt or frustrated, overwhelmed, whatever it is. So one of my boundaries, as you know, and anybody who comes into contact with me, I usually tell them this up front is I don't like to be tickled.
Mhm.
I just don't. I don't even like you to get really close to my underarms because as a kid, I was held down and tickled. And
Mm,
of course, you're laughing, but you're not. I was like crying and laughing,
mm,
and it was a very terrible situation. Anyways, I don't like to be tickled. There's something about it that bothers me. So that's kind of a way of kind of thinking about like what kinds of situations in your life and things make you uncomfortable or make you feel unsafe or make you feel obliged to do something like
mhm.
push your buttons or whatever.
It's interesting in that example, right? The boundaries go beyond our preferences in a way. It is to protect us, right? Here you had a traumatic experience that can easily be triggered again and bring you right back to that unpleasant feeling.
Hmm.
So, we need to know the boundaries are coming down to what not only our preferences, but what might make us feel more comfortable, what make us feel more safe, what we are wanting, what we are not wanting, what we're unwilling to tolerate, and how we'd like to be treated by others, and how we want them to treat us. So some crossing of boundaries may be accidental through a
Yeah.
lack of communication. We've not yet let it be known, and some may be, in fact, unfortunately, more intentional. Some people pushing our boundaries to get what they want or what they need,
Hmm.
and we need to be able to recognize where those boundaries are. My mother always used to say it so wonderfully. She said that uh, your rights end where mine begin, and my rights end where yours begin. That we would recognize each other's boundaries and not go over those, whether it is intentionally or accidentally.
Yeah, that's a great. Oh, mama, that's such a great example. That's a great way of putting it. I mean, no one intends to, and it's not even that it's tickling. Even getting close to my underarms makes me like uncomfortable, right? And I
Mhm.
I worked with someone as well that was abused, and there's a certain when as a child, and there's certain parts of her body that she doesn't like that triggers that for her, and
Mhm.
she's working through that, but then she has to tell people that. And it was like one of the things she's like, I feel, shitty telling that to somebody, but I think that people ultimately don't want to cross our boundaries, generally. I'd like to believe that that's the case. But like you said, I think you have to remind people. So,
Mhm. Well, maybe we go on the premise that they just didn't know yet, and that's fair. But
yeah.
then we have a responsibility to ourselves to announce it, and it's not always easy. I can appreciate that some people come from a point where they were not able, or for whatever reasons, it was difficult for them to announce their own position, and we kind of play into that, and we continue doing that until we get to the point where we say, "Well, I need to respect myself, and I need to have other people respect me as well." So we let it be known what these are, and we establish these. And in time, we find out, like many other things, the more we talk about it, the more we come to announce it, the more familiar we become with it, the more confident we are in establishing them and maintaining them.
Yeah, that's a great point. Um, I don't know if this is a great place to give the example, but I had an issue come up recently that I'm sort of grappling with. I think I've come to terms with it, about whether something was crossing a boundary for me. And as we do this, we are you and I are consensually open. We have a consensual non-monogamous relationship, polyamorous, open. And when we meet people, we tell them this, and we value that idea of being open and consensual and ethical and that sort of thing. And so a situation arose for me where someone I'd been in a relationship with before approached me because they wanted to get together and have some fun, which, we always used to have a lot of fun together. And except that now this person has been in a relationship, which is not open. And so essentially what they're doing, what we would be doing, they would be doing, is cheating on that partner. And so I had to really think about this. And you and I had a conversation even as early as this morning, recent as this morning, about, because part of me is like, well, it's not my responsibility, their relationship with their partner, right? But I do value openness. And do I really want to be that other person? And by engaging in that, am I just encouraging that behavior, which I believe to be not ethical?
Mm-hmm. So it may not align with your values, with your question of ethics, how you feel about things being right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess the easiest test is, how would I feel if it were being done to me?
Yeah, that's what you said, and I was like, I don't think I'd like that.
I don't think. Hmm. But isn't that an easy test? I mean, I guess it is one of the commandments, right? Do unto others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, well, it's, forget about which religion it comes from. I think they share all of that, but it's a wonderful idea that we might be empathetic. We might consider how it would be to be on the other side of that. And I know that I've been on both sides of that. I've been cheated on and I've been the cheater, and neither one of them felt very good. They weren't true to my authentic self. Whereas now I go about trying to state my position much more clearly. So I at least feel comfortable with my own values, my own position, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how would I feel if it were being done to me?
Yeah, I've definitely been on. Have I been on both sides? I've definitely been on I've been the cheat. I've been the other woman, so to speak. And yeah, it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good. And also the idea of being a secret and like all that other stuff. Like this. I mean, I have my own life and own things right now, so I think that's less of an issue. But I do recall being that way, and then thinking about the other person, like would I want to be with that person anyway? Yeah. So I think, this is the good segue into the second part, is like thinking about why it's important to you. For me, like you said, this is important because it's something I value, is openness and communication and being ethical about things.
Well, I think that is one of the values that we hold highest, right? Is that
Mhm.
we should be honest and transparent about it. And having participated in that, trying to ascribe to those values has really changed the way that I relate to other people, and also how it makes me feel about myself. Being able to be transparent in that way, being open and honest that way, it is very liberating. It's much different than how it was in the past. In the past, I didn't think that I could announce myself this way. I didn't think that there would be people who would accept me this way. And yet I come to find out that I can accept myself this way. And that's what's most important.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the situation I was describing, I was actually asking the person. I said, I'd feel more comfortable if you were open about this with your partner, and I'm curious as to why they feel they can't do that. Do you want to be in a situation where you feel you have to lie to a partner? Like, what does that,
Well, personally, I didn't know that it would have ever been acceptable to them, because the only example I had was essentially two parents that I had, and they were going outside of the marriage, and not able to announce it to each other. So I had the idea, well, this was an unacceptable position to have because it was shrouded in secrecy, and it was presented as though it was something that was unacceptable, and it was unacceptable. It was cheating, as opposed to announcing our preference to open relating, to being in any other way. And then it totally changes it, because you might not necessarily want to participate in that. You might not like my position in it, but at least it won't become an issue of whether or not you can trust me.
Yeah. I'm so curious about people. There's a few people watching. I'd love to hear in the comments what, if there's certain, boundaries that you have find hard to communicate, and what might be behind that.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. So when thinking about, why it's important to you, for me, it was really great to do this exercise, which is also part of our course, where you actually write down your boundary and why it's important to you.
Right.
And I think the writing down of it helps solidify, it makes it easier to communicate that to others. And we're not saying that you have to justify your boundaries. You absolutely do not have to justify your boundaries to anybody. If you don't want something, if something's uncomfortable, I know you wrote in our notes, my body's my own and I decide what's comfortable and what's not. You don't have to justify that to someone. If you don't want someone touching your underarms, you don't need to, they don't need to know. They just need to not do that, right? But knowing why it's important to you, I think, is sometimes it makes it easier to communicate.
Yeah. I cited that one about my body is my own and I decide what feels comfortable and what doesn't. Hopefully that's taught to us as young children, but unfortunately, often it is not. In fact, children are not often given voice to say what they're wanting or not wanting, and we put it upon them as adults, thinking that we know best. But when are we ever invited to really express our preferences? So if we've not learned that language before, that's unfortunate, but doesn't mean it's too late for us to learn it now. We now say what our preferences are. And by taking time to really look introspectively, to write down these things, it will inform us as to how we might feel about it and how we're going to go about more comfortably announcing it and establishing healthier boundaries for ourselves and recognizing the boundaries of others.
Yeah. I'm just seeing Drang has put in a comment here. How do you determine the truth of the current relationship without cross-examining them and enjoying the new excitement? Yeah, because when you meet someone anew, you don't necessarily know what their situation is. You sort of have to believe them. Yeah, and if they're not being honest, so we don't necessarily know if someone's being honest when we first meet them, and that is so true. Actually, somebody just said to me the other day, someone had met someone new, and they said, I hope they're not married, because I think that person in the past had gotten involved with people who were married unknowingly, right? And yeah, you have to sort of take people at face value. But I feel like there's sometimes clues to it,
Well,
that you have to pay attention to. I've been in that situation before where I don't think I wanted to believe the cues.
Well, Dr. Spotnitz says we know each other in the first 5 minutes, right? So our unconscious is alerted to it. Whether we want to recognize it or not is another point. But to Drang's comment also, it makes me think back to another part of the discussion we're having is when I want to announce my boundaries, when I want to announce my preferences, the do's and don'ts, but I just meet you. And do I unpack all of that within the first 3 seconds of having met you? Hi, how are you? Well, here are my boundaries. So when are we going to have opportunity to announce and find out from the others what their boundaries and preferences are? Yeah,
well,
a lot of people.
Sometimes it can be an interesting thing. I don't know what it's called, but there's this exercise. I know somebody I worked with did. Someone will probably know. If you know what it is, put it in the comments. Such and such number, 100 questions to fall in love or something like that. And he said he and his partner asked all these became his wife actually, asked all these questions on their second date sort of thing, and got to really know each other. And that's a good way to do it. And just, I don't know, making it conversational. And, these are the kind, you can start by these are things I value, you know what I mean? But yeah, you don't necessarily have to unpack, I think, all your boundaries in one sitting. I think boundaries, I like to think of consent. It's it's ongoing, right? And so someone recently messaged me, and they were saying how hard they have to be clear on their boundaries, and they get into a situation where they feel like if they don't say everything, like you said, then they're in a situation where somebody has hope for something that might happen and then is disappointed. And I was like, but it's like consent, it's ongoing. People shouldn't assume that because of this is going to happen, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to unpack them, I think, all at once.
No, and I don't think it would be possible to unpack all of them all at once anyway. But I do like the approach that you mentioned about making a game of it and having it be part of conversation, that we could sort of utilize the humor, but also use the game almost as a third that says, well, the game wants us to talk about, how we feel about cheating, or how we feel about bodily fluids, or how we feel about whatever it might be. And we can use that as the vehicle to express ourselves and to find out what the other person's stance is on that as well.
Yeah. And
Either way, but either way, it always comes down to the same basic part of that essential building block, and that is communication, right? Really being able to express from ourselves and to receive from the others.
Yeah. There's also, there's a lot of like yes, no, maybe checklists, and maybe you don't do that on the first date, but there's some, short ones that are like simple, like I like this, I don't like this, I like this, I like this, I'm interested in this is a maybe. And then there's really extensive ones that get into like things like you said, like bodily fluids, like, yeah, no, I don't like them. Or yeah, sure. Bring on the golden showers.
What's so interesting is, and I'm not saying that it's any easier for me, but our level of discomfort, and I mean our level of discomfort in talking about our emotional investments or our preferences, like in boundaries, it might not be a first date thing, and yet many of us would have sex on the first date before even having these conversations. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Is it easier? Is it somehow I don't know, more accessible to be physical or sexual than it is to speak of our heart or our emotions, of our thoughts? What's it like for you?
I think it can be, because it's easier, I think, to lay down physical boundaries, right? Like, I don't like this, I like this, but much harder to say, like, this is what I'm looking for, or this is, how I want to relate, or, whatever it is, right? I think it's why people sometimes struggle to share, like if they're on dating apps, if they're on just the standard ones, like, saying that they are ethically open, because they're worried that there'll be a prejudgment, or someone might not meet them, or whatever,
But then that is, in a sense, subscribing to our fears. It is a universe of scarcity, as opposed to believing that it is viable and seeing it manifest.
Yes, which is why it's important to work. Number 3 is work on your beliefs around your boundaries. So one of my clients, was saying that they want to take things slow, and they feel like people won't accept them or want to date them if that's what they put out as a boundary. And I said, that's a belief that you can work on, because for me, very rarely do I have sex on the first date. And I actually don't like to do it, because I don't like that to be the expectation. If somebody wants to date me, then they are willing to wait until I feel comfortable with them. So thinking about what you believe about your boundaries, and instead of feeling like they're a burden to someone else, that they're actually a relief, like someone knowing what my boundaries, people want to know what my boundaries are. Like, I like to believe that.
I think you're absolutely right. People do want to know what our boundaries are, because healthy fences make for healthy neighbors. But really what it does is we find out where we can go and still be okay, and where we can end up and not be okay. So if it's well defined, if I know where the markers are, where the fence posts are, well, then I know I'm in good territory, or I'm starting to tread in territory that might not be so good for either of us, right? So having well-established boundaries, communicating them openly and clearly, is the key to that feeling of better comfort.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another belief you can work on, one of our friends said this to me once before, like I had to remind them a couple times. It wasn't a boundary, but it was just a preference around a sexual thing. And I've had to remind them several times. Now they know it, like they've figured it out, and they're like a sweet human. And obviously they want to know what it is. And he said to me, I am here for your pleasure. And I like to adopt that for any of my relationships. And I want to be here for the pleasure of my partners, and pleasure and enjoyment, not just pleasure, but enjoyment in life. And so I want to know. So, yeah. So I'm curious if anyone has any beliefs that they want to adopt in order to make it easier to communicate their boundaries. So how you might think of your boundaries differently. because I think it's important. It's an important part of it because it also makes it easier to do number 4, which is communicate them as clearly and simple as possible and being specific.
Hmm. Yeah. So, what is it about uh, the specificities? It's a Monday morning. What is it about
Monday.
being, thank you. We can put it in the comments on how to speak English. But what is it about being specific that is so important? Why should I want to be clear and simple?
Yeah, I think so. There's not misinterpretation,
Aha.
you know?
Misinterpretation, miscommunications, because that is, in fact, often when things tend to go south, right? I didn't know, or I thought it was like this, or all these things that are open to interpretation. Whereas if we can be specific, if we can be clear about it, it really does eliminate those misunderstandings or those misinterpretations.
Yeah,
Both
and it's
affecting ourselves and them.
yeah, and you can do it in a way, you can express it in a way that's, um, kind of fun too, right? And because that same client that was like, I want to take things slow, they were like, how do I express my boundaries in a way that's sexy? Which I thought was a really fun challenge to think about it. And, so I gave her some examples like, when X happens, I feel Y. I'd love you to do Z. You know what I mean? Or one of the things that excites me is, and then dot dot dot, what excites you. And then specifically to their concern is, I value taking things slow to build anticipation, excitement over time. So I'd like you to start with X, and then once I feel Y, then do Z. What about you? You know?
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing that we are able to state it clearly like that. But it also goes into our 5th point of being prepared to remind people. So we may
Mm,
really set out to be clear, and we may be very clear, and they may, in all earnest, want to receive and absorb these boundaries, but they may not necessarily get it the first time. Or we may meet new people and have to restate our boundaries with them. It may be new to them. So we are also gentle with ourselves, reminding ourselves that maybe it's not a one-time done thing, that we might have to restate these things. And again, as we said earlier on, they may change over time, which is perfectly fantastic as well. But we
yeah.
might take it upon ourselves to know that we might have to be prepared to remind and restate these boundaries on occasion.
hmm And then also, you asked the question we were talking about this morning is, do we offer consequences to crossing boundaries? And what are the consequences?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you have to
Yeah.
be prepared to enforce the consequences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if someone chooses not to respect our boundaries over time, then we do have options, right? We can say, well, we're going to emotionally detach or physically distance ourselves, or even perhaps end the relationship. So
Mhm.
it's not as though we announce these boundaries and that's it, we just turn them over. We stand up for these boundaries as well.
Exactly.
Mhm.
All right. So we talked today about what's important, the 5 tips, which are knowing your boundaries, writing down why they're important, working on your beliefs and communicating them, and being prepared to remind people and take
Mhm.
action. So
Yeah, well said.
seems simple, right? But it's not it's not always this simple. And I think it is an exercise that's important to do, even if you've done it before. And so, as we mentioned earlier, this is a bigger version of this training. It's part of our Poly Newbies course, and we have a specific exercise around this that kind of walks you through all these steps with the prompts and everything like that. So we did our first live training last week, and this coming a week from now, Monday, we're doing the second one, which is on styles of non-monogamy, which is super fun. I love that one. So figuring out what style is right for me. So if you jump in now, you can still get the price until September 30th, which is, I think, yeah. So we started, but you can still jump in and catch up by next Monday and follow along with us. And the founding members price is good till the 30th, which I think is Friday. Yeah. So jump in now because it's a great deal. There's a lot packed in. There's a lot of tools you'll use over and over again.
Mhm.
And yeah, we know you'll love it. So hoping you'll join us. If you have questions, let us know. Yeah. Thumbs up. Was that a good talk on boundaries? I think it was a thumbs up. What do you think, Andre?
I think every time we're talking about anything related to how we are is a good talk, right? It's
Yeah.
always just keep talking, say everything, let it be known, ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I agree.
information is power.
Exactly. All right, Andre, thanks. And thanks to everyone who is watching in us live or in the replay. And yeah, reach out if you have questions about the course or if you have questions in general. We're happy to chat anytime. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye. Have a great Monday.